The bucket hit her square in the chest, cold water exploding across her dress before she even saw it coming. Laughter erupted behind her Deputy Morrison, and his friends doubled over like it was the finest joke they'd witnessed all year. "Dance for us, Maggie. Show us how light on your feet you are." She stood there dripping frozen in the middle of Main Street while the whole town watched. Some smiled, some turned away. No one helped. That was the moment Maggie Brennan realized she'd rather die alone in the mountains than live one more day in Bitter Creek. Before we continue with Maggie's story, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you want to see how this impossible choice changes everything, hit that subscribe button and stay with me until the end.
Look at her.
Trust me, you won't believe where this goes. The water soaked through to her skin, icy against the August heat. Maggie's hands trembled as she bent to retrieve the bucket, now rolling in the dirt. Around her, the sounds of Bitter Creek continued, horses clopping wagon wheels, creaking, the blacksmith's hammer ringing. Life went on. It always did. "Aw, don't cry now," Morrison called, his voice thick with false sweetness. "We're just having a bit of fun." Maggie didn't cry. Not anymore. She'd learned years ago that tears only made them laugh harder. Instead, she straightened, gripped the bucket handle until her knuckles went white, and walked. One foot in front of the other. Past the general store where Mrs. Hendricks looked away. Past the church where Reverend Shaw was posting notices. Past the saloon where men leaned against the rail shaking their heads. "That girl's gonna end up in the mountains with the crazy folk," one muttered. "If she's lucky," another replied. The bucket banged against her leg with each step, a dull rhythm that matched her heartbeat. Her dress clung to her body, outlining every curve, every inch the town had decided made her worthless. The red hair her mother had called "kissed by fire" was just another mark against her here. Irish, fat, poor. The trifecta of undesirability in Bitter Creek, Wyoming territory, 1876. By the time she reached her aunt's boarding house on the edge of town, the sun had dried the worst of it, leaving her dress stiff with dirt-tinged water. She paused at the door, listening. Voices inside. Her aunt had company. "It's unconscionable, that's what it is." That was Mrs. Hendricks, the general store owner's wife. "A marriage lottery, like we're cattle." "It's practical." Aunt Sarah's voice sharp as always. "The territory needs families. The men need wives. The math is simple." "And the women." A third voice, younger. Lily Chen, who ran the laundry with her father. "What do we need?" "To survive," Aunt Sarah said flatly. "Same as always." Maggie pushed the door open. 3 heads turned. Mrs. Hendricks's eyes widened at Maggie's state. Lily's face remained carefully neutral. Aunt Sarah's lips pressed into a thin line. "What happened to you?" "Bucket," Maggie said shortly. "Accident." "Another one." Aunt Sarah rose, arms crossed. "You're clumsy as a newborn foal, girl. Go change before you drip all over my clean floors." Maggie moved toward the narrow stairs, but her aunt's next words stopped her cold. "She'll be at the gathering tomorrow, of course. Sheriff's orders every unmarried woman between 15 and 40. Silence. Then Mrs. Hendricks cleared her throat. "Sarah, surely you don't mean—" "I mean exactly what the sheriff ordered. Every woman, even her." The "her" landed like a slap. Maggie's fingers tightened on the banister. "But who would—" "Mrs." Hendricks trailed off the unspoken words louder than anything she could have said. "No one," Aunt Sarah said crisply. "Which is precisely why she'll stand there. So people can see I did my duty. Gave her every chance, even knowing it's futile." Maggie climbed the stairs, each step heavier than the last. Behind her, the conversation continued in hushed tones, but she'd heard enough. She'd heard it all her life. The attic room was stifling, the small window doing little against the afternoon heat. Maggie peeled off the wet dress and stood in her chemise, staring at the cracked mirror propped against the wall. Round face. freckles scattered like someone had flicked paint across her nose, red hair escaping its pins in wild curls. Body that had never been delicate, never been the willow-thin ideal that made men write poetry. She traced the scar on her left wrist, a thick white line she usually kept covered. The ship from Ireland 9 years ago. A storm, a broken crate. A 12-year-old girl who'd learned that survival came with marks. "At least you're useful, since you'll never be wanted," her aunt had said the day she'd arrived orphaned and terrified. 9 years, and the message had never changed. Maggie pulled on her other dress, brown sturdy, equally unflattering, according to the town's standards, and sat on the narrow bed. Beneath it was a wooden box carved with Celtic knots. Inside letters she'd written to her dead mother over the years. Hundreds of them never sent because there was nowhere to send them. She pulled out the latest, dated just last week. Mama. I'm 26 now, an old maid by Bitter Creek standards. Aunt Sarah says I should be grateful she's kept me this long. Maybe she's right. Maybe I should feel lucky. But Mama, I don't feel lucky. I feel invisible, except when they want someone to mock. I feel like I'm drowning on dry land. Remember how Da used to say I had healing hands? How I could calm any spooked horse, help birth any calf. That skill doesn't matter here. It's all about my face, my body, my hair. Things I can't change. I'm so tired, Mama. So tired of pretending it doesn't hurt. You're Maggie? She set the letter aside and pulled out a pencil, a precious commodity she guarded carefully. At the bottom of the box were her other treasures, sketches of animals done from memory or from stolen glances at the livestock pens. Horses mid-gallop, dogs sleeping in doorways, a cat stretching in sunlight. Drawing was the only time her hands didn't shake, the only time she felt like she had worth. A knock at the door. Maggie? Aunt Sarah's voice not quite as harsh. Come down. We need to prepare you for tomorrow. Maggie closed the box, slid it back under the bed, and descended. The kitchen smelled like lye soap and coffee. Aunt Sarah stood at the table, a dress laid out pale blue with a high collar and long sleeves. It looked like it had been expensive once. This was mine, her aunt said, not looking at her. From before Thomas died. Before? She waved a hand encompassing all the befores. It'll do. Maggie stared at the dress. It was beautiful in a severe way, and it would never fit. Aunt Sarah, don't argue. We'll let out the seams. Lily's coming by tonight to help. She's good with a needle. Why? The word escaped before Maggie could stop it. Why bother? You said yourself no one will choose me. Her aunt's jaw worked. For a moment something flickered across her face, something that might have been pain or regret or just exhaustion. Then it was gone. Because I won't have anyone saying I didn't try, that I kept you hidden away like something shameful. She finally met Maggie's eyes. You'll stand there with the other women. You'll hold your head up, and when it's over and you come home, at least we'll know we did everything proper. We. As if they were in this together. As if her aunt hadn't spent 9 years making sure Maggie knew exactly how burdensome her existence was. But Maggie nodded, because what else could she do? Lily arrived after supper carrying her sewing basket. She was small, neat, with hair so black it shone blue in the lamplight. She'd been in Bitter Creek for 2 years, brought by her father to work the mines before he'd scraped together enough for the laundry business. The town tolerated them because they needed the work done, but tolerance wasn't acceptance. Sit, Lily said, gesturing to the chair. Her English was flawless, her accent barely noticeable. Let me see. She circled Maggie, measuring with her eyes and hands. Aunt Sarah hovered nearby, arms crossed. It'll fit, Lily announced, with adjustments. For the next 2 hours, the 3 women worked in near silence. Lily's needle flashed in the lamplight, letting out seams, adding panels from fabric Aunt Sarah produced from a trunk. Maggie stood still as a dressmaker's dummy, trying not to think about tomorrow. This lottery, Lily said, suddenly breaking the quiet. It's not fair to anyone. Fair. Aunt Sarah laughed sharp and bitter. Since when has life been fair, girl? Doesn't mean we shouldn't say it. Lily bit off a thread. Men choose. Women wait. Men decide our futures like we're property. That's how it's always been, Aunt Sarah said. Doesn't make it right. Maggie glanced at Lily surprised. They'd never spoken beyond pleasantries. She'd assumed Lily looked down on her like everyone else. Lily caught her look. You think I don't know what it's like to stand somewhere hoping to be invisible? I see how people look at me. At my father. We're useful, so they let us stay. But we're not people to them. Not really. Then why go tomorrow? Maggie asked quietly. Same reason you will. Because if we don't, they'll make it worse. At least this way we control something, even if it's just how we stand there. The dress came together slowly. By midnight, it was done. Lily held it up, and even Aunt Sarah nodded approval. Try it, Lily said. Maggie slipped it on behind the screen. The fabric whispered against her skin, cool and foreign. When she emerged, both women stared. Well, Aunt Sarah said finally, you look presentable. It was the closest thing to a compliment Maggie had ever received from her aunt. She turned to the small mirror by the door. The dress fit well, not fashionable, not beautiful, but dignified. The blue made her hair look less aggressively red, more auburn. The high collar covered the freckles on her chest. She looked like someone's wife, someone's choice. The thought made her throat tight. Tomorrow, Aunt Sarah said, you'll wear your hair in a braid, not those wild curls. And you'll stand straight, no slouching. You represent this house. Yes, ma'am. And Maggie? Her aunt's voice softened just a fraction. It won't be as bad as you think. It'll be over quickly. Maggie doubted that, but she nodded anyway. Lily packed up her sewing basket. At the door, she paused. The first girl chosen is the one everyone envies. The last girl chosen is the one everyone pities. But Maggie? The ones not chosen at all. We're the ones who get to define ourselves. She smiled small and sad. Maybe that's freedom. Maybe that's curse. We'll find out tomorrow. After she left, Maggie climbed back to the attic. She should sleep. Morning would come too soon. But instead, she sat by the window watching Bitter Creek settle into night. Lamplights winked out one by one. Dogs barked in the distance. Somewhere a baby cried. Somewhere in this town, men were deciding which women they'd claim tomorrow, weighing options like horseflesh. And the women, what were they doing? Praying, planning. Hoping. Maggie pulled out her pencil and a scrap of paper. She sketched quickly, not thinking, just letting her hand move. When she finished, she stared at what she'd drawn. A bird in a cage. Door open. But the bird still inside, gripping the perch. She crumpled it, threw it in the corner, and finally, as the moon climbed high, let herself cry. Just this once. Just tonight. Tomorrow she'd wear the blue dress and stand in the square and let them see her. Let them judge. Let them pass her by. Tomorrow she'd survive it. Tonight she could break. Morning came with harsh sunlight and her aunt's voice calling up the stairs. Time, Maggie. She dressed in the blue gown, braided her hair as instructed, and descended. Aunt Sarah waited with a bonnet white plain proper. She tied it under Maggie's chin with rough efficiency. Remember, head up. Don't fidget. Don't cry. No matter what happens, you hold yourself together until we're home. Understood. Yes, ma'am. They walked to town together. Other women filled the streets, all heading the same direction. Some had their mothers with them, whispering last-minute advice. Some walked in groups holding hands, faces pale with nerves. A few even laughed giddy with the strange excitement of it all. Maggie walked alone. Aunt Sarah stayed 3 steps behind, not quite with her, not quite apart. The message was clear. I brought her, but she's not mine. Not really. The town square had been transformed. A wooden platform stood at the north end, already occupied by Sheriff John Garrett and his deputies. Chairs lined the edges for the town council and prominent citizens, but the center was empty, waiting for the women. "Ladies," the sheriff's voice carried across the square, deep and authoritative. "Form a line, face the crowd. This is how it'll work. Men will step forward in the order drawn this morning. Each man chooses. Each woman accepts. No refusals, no exceptions. The territory needs families, and by God, we'll have them." Maggie found her place at the end of the line. 15 women, total ages, ranging from a girl who couldn't be more than 16 to a widow in her late 30s. Some wore their best dresses. Some wore work clothes, defiant or resigned. All wore the same expression underneath fear masked as courage. Lily stood near the middle, hands folded, face serene. She caught Maggie's eye and nodded once. "We survived this." The crowd gathered. It seemed like all of Bitter Creek had turned out, men eager to see who'd be chosen. Women eager to judge children, running between legs, not understanding the gravity, but sensing the spectacle. Deputy Morrison pushed to the front, grinning. "This gonna be good," he said to no one in particular. The sheriff raised his hand. Silence fell thick and immediate. "Before we begin," he announced, "I want to make one thing clear. This isn't about love. This is about duty, about building something lasting. Romance can come later or not at all. What matters is commitment, stability, the future of Bitter Creek." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some nodded. Some shifted uncomfortably. Maggie's hands trembled, so she locked them behind her back where no one could see. "Now," the sheriff continued, "we have a special case today. A man who's avoided town business for too long. A man who owes this community his participation." He turned toward the east end of the square. "Benjamin Holloway, step forward." The crowd parted. Maggie couldn't see over their heads, but she heard the whispers. "The hermit? He never comes to town. What's he doing here? Sheriff must have forced him." Then the man emerged from the crowd, and Maggie's breath caught. He was taller than any man she'd seen, broad-shouldered beneath a worn coat. His hat was pulled low, shadowing his face, but she could see the gray at his temples, the hard line of his jaw. He moved with a limp, slight but noticeable, favoring his left leg. When he reached the platform, he stopped. Didn't climb the steps, just stood there facing the sheriff. "Mr. Holloway," Sheriff Garrett said with the tone of a man who'd had this conversation before. "You know why you're here. I know what you think." His voice was low, rough, like he didn't use it often. "But I told you, and I told you," the sheriff cut him off, "that every able man in this territory participates. No exceptions. You want to keep that ranch. You want the bank to approve your expansion. You need a wife. That's how society works. That's how control works," the man Ben Holloway said quietly. The sheriff's face hardened. "Choose, or I'll choose for you." The silence stretched. Maggie watched, fascinated despite herself. This man was fighting the same system, just from a different angle. He didn't want to choose any more than she wanted to be chosen. Finally, Ben Holloway lifted his head and looked at the line of women. His eyes were dark, shadowed by more than just his hat brim. Haunted, Maggie thought. This was a man carrying ghosts. He scanned the line slowly, paused on the young blonde girl who blushed and looked down, moved to the widow who met his gaze steadily, continued to Lily who remained serene. Then he reached Maggie at the end. Their eyes met and something passed between them, recognition maybe, or just shared exhaustion. The understanding of two people who'd been pushed to this point against their will. He stared at her for a long moment. Too long. The crowd began to whisper. Is he really considering? Look at him staring at the Irish girl. Must be having trouble deciding between the good ones. But his gaze didn't move. He studied her with an intensity that should have made her look away, should have made her shrink. Instead, Maggie lifted her chin and stared back. See me, she thought. Really see me. Then pass me by like everyone else. At least then it would be over. Ben Holloway's jaw tightened. He looked back at the sheriff. If I have to do this, you do? Then I choose her. He pointed directly at Maggie. The one at the end. The square exploded. Laughter came first, sharp, disbelieving cackles that rippled through the crowd like wildfire. Then the gasps. Then the voices all talking at once, overlapping in a cacophony of shock and mockery. He can't be serious. Out of all these women. The Irish girl, the fat one. Someone check if he's been drinking. Maggie stood frozen, every muscle locked. Her ears rang. The words washed over her, but didn't penetrate, like she was underwater, drowning in the noise. Her eyes found Ben Holloway still standing below the platform, hands still extended toward her. He hadn't moved, hadn't flinched, hadn't laughed. Sheriff Garrett's eyebrows had climbed so high they nearly reached his hat brim. Mr. Holloway, perhaps you'd like to reconsider. No. The single word cut through the chaos. The crowd quieted slightly, leaning in to hear. No. The sheriff's voice carried disbelief. Son, I'm giving you a chance to. I made my choice. Ben's voice stayed level, but something hard had entered it. You said choose. I chose. Deputy Morrison pushed forward, still grinning like this was the best entertainment he'd seen in months. Come on, Holloway. We all know you can do better than that. Look at Sarah Mitchell there, pretty as a picture. Or Mary Thornton, she can cook like nobody's business. Why would you saddle yourself with, enough? Ben turned to face Morrison, and something in his expression made the deputy step back. My choice is made. The women in line had turned to stare at Maggie. Some looked confused. Some looked relieved she'd been chosen first, which meant they still had chances with better men. But a few looked at her with something that might have been pity or might have been contempt. Hard to tell the difference in Bitter Creek. Maggie's throat had closed completely. She couldn't have spoken if her life depended on it. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. This was worse than being passed over. This was... Well, Sheriff Garrett said slowly, recovering his composure. A choice has been made, witnessed by all present. He looked directly at Maggie. Miss Brennan, step forward. Her legs wouldn't move. They'd turned to stone, rooted to the dirt. Maggie. Aunt Sarah's voice came from somewhere in the crowd, tight and strange. Do as the sheriff says. Somehow Maggie's feet obeyed. 1 step, 2, 3. The line of women parted for her like she carried plague. She reached the edge of the platform and stopped, unable to go further. Unable to climb those 3 steps that would make this real. Ben Holloway moved before anyone else could. He crossed to the platform stairs and climbed them with that slight limp, each step deliberate. When he reached her level, he stopped, keeping distance between them. Up close, she could see his face more clearly. Sharp features weathered by sun and hardship, a scar running along his jaw, gray eyes that looked like storm clouds. Ma'am, he said quietly, so only she could hear. I know this isn't what you wanted. Her voice came back in a whisper. What are you doing? Same thing you are. His mouth twisted, not quite a smile. Surviving. Before she could respond, the sheriff's voice boomed across the square. By the authority granted to me by the territory of Wyoming, and witnessed by this community, I declare Benjamin Holloway and Margaret Brennan bound in matrimonial intent. The formal ceremony will occur within the month. Like hell it will! The voice came from the crowd, a woman's voice sharp with outrage. Aunt Sarah pushed through to the front, face flushed. Sheriff, I must object. This is irregular. The girl is under my care and I won't have her what Mrs. Brennan. The sheriff's tone turned cold. Won't have her married off like every other woman here. She's of age. The law is clear. The law is meant to create stable families, not mockeries. Aunt Sarah's voice rose. This man has chosen her out of spite or madness, or God knows what reason, but it isn't right and everyone here knows it. The crowd murmured agreement. Someone shouted, "It ain't natural!" Ben's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Just stood there absorbing the accusations like he'd been absorbing them all his life. "My reasons are my own," he said finally. "And they're nobody's business but mine and Miss Brennan's." "Oh, they're the town's business when we all have to watch this farce play out." That was Mrs. Hendricks emboldened now. "That girl can't run a household, can't manage a ranch. What use is she to a working man?" "More than you'd imagine," Ben said, and his voice had gone quiet again. Dangerous quiet. "And I'll thank you to keep your opinions about my wife to yourself." "She's not your wife yet," Aunt Sarah snapped. "She will be." Ben turned to Sheriff Garrett. "Unless you're planning to go back on territorial law, that what we're doing now, letting the town vote on which marriages are acceptable." The sheriff's face reddened. He was caught, and everyone knew it. The law was the law, even when it produced outcomes nobody expected. "The choice stands," he said tersely. "Mr. Holloway, you'll have the license by week's end. Reverend Shaw will perform the ceremony." He shot a look at the crowd. "And anyone who has objections can keep them to themselves or answer to me." The threat worked mostly. The crowd settled into disgruntled muttering instead of open hostility. But the damage was done. Maggie could feel the weight of their judgment, their disbelief, their barely contained laughter pressing against her from all sides. She swayed slightly. Ben noticed his hand came out, steadying her elbow with surprising gentleness. "Easy," he murmured. "Almost through." But they weren't. The sheriff gestured to the remaining women. "Let's continue. Next man, step forward." The lottery went on. Maggie stood beside Ben on the platform feeling like a specimen on display. Each subsequent choice felt like a commentary on hers. The second man chose the blonde girl, young and blushing. The crowd approved with smiles and nods. The third chose the widow, practical and sensible. More approval. One by one, women were claimed, and each choice made sense in ways Maggie's didn't. Lily was chosen fifth by a quiet miner named Thomas Webb. As she passed Maggie to join her new husband, she whispered, "Courage." By the time the last woman was chosen, a seamstress named Anne, who'd probably hemmed half the clothes in town, Maggie felt hollowed out. Every nerve exposed, every inadequacy highlighted by contrast. "That concludes the proceedings," Sheriff Garrett announced. "Couples, you have 4 weeks to prepare. Reverend Shaw will schedule ceremonies. Dismissed." The platform emptied quickly. Couples descended to meet families to receive congratulations or commiserations. Ben and Maggie were left standing alone at the top, neither quite ready to face what waited below. "I have a wagon," Ben said. "If you need to collect your things, now." Maggie's voice came out higher than intended. "You mean today? Sheriff said binding intent. In frontier terms, that means—" He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "You're under my responsibility now, not your aunt's. But if you need time—" "She needs time to understand what she's gotten herself into," Aunt Sarah said, climbing the platform steps with grim determination. "Maggie, come home. We'll sort this mess out." "There's nothing to sort," Ben said. "The choice is made. The choice is insane." Aunt Sarah grabbed Maggie's arm. "You don't know this man. You don't know what he wants with you. For all we know, Mrs. Brennan." Ben's voice had gone very quiet. "Release her arm." Something in his tone made Aunt Sarah let go. She stepped back, and for the first time, Maggie saw something like fear cross her aunt's face. "I meant no disrespect," Aunt Sarah said stiffly. "But the girl is my responsibility." "Was," Ben corrected. "Now she's mine. Or rather," he glanced at Maggie, "her own. But she'll be living at my ranch under my protection. Those are the terms you agreed to when you brought her here. I brought her because the law demanded it, not because I thought some hermit would—" Aunt Sarah cut herself off, breathing hard. "Fine, take her." But when this arrangement falls apart, don't come crying to me." She descended the steps without another word, disappearing into the dispersing crowd. Maggie stood very still, trying to process what had just happened. Her entire life had changed in the span of 15 minutes. She'd gone from unmarriageable burden to someone's unwanted wife. She didn't know which was worse. "Miss Brennan." Ben's voice pulled her back. "I won't force you to come today. You can take whatever time you need. But I want you to know." He paused, choosing words carefully. "I didn't choose you as a joke, and I didn't choose you out of pity." "Then why?" The question burst out before she could stop it. "Why me? You could have had any woman here." He shook his head. "No, I couldn't have. Because any woman here would have expected things I can't give, would have wanted things I don't have." He met her eyes, and she saw the truth there, raw and painful. "I needed someone who wouldn't expect love. Someone who understood what it's like to be chosen for the wrong reasons." The words should have hurt. Maybe they did, but they also held a strange honesty that nothing else today had. "And what do you expect from me?" Maggie asked. "Work," he said simply. "Partnership if we're lucky. Space to heal if we're honest." He gestured toward the now empty square. "I have a ranch that's barely surviving. I have debts and demons and not much else. But what I do have is mine, and I don't answer to this town. If you come with me, you won't either." It wasn't a love declaration. It wasn't even particularly kind. But it was real, which was more than anyone else had offered her in 9 years. Maggie looked at the boarding house where she'd lived at the town that had mocked her, at the faces still lingering to watch this spectacle play out. Then she looked at Ben Holloway, this stranger who'd upended everything for reasons she didn't fully understand but somehow believed. "I need an hour," she said, "to pack." Something that might have been relief crossed his face. "I'll wait." The hour passed in a blur. Maggie threw her few possessions into a canvas bag: the dresses, the box of letters, her sketching supplies, the hairbrush her mother had brought from Ireland. Aunt Sarah didn't come upstairs. Didn't offer farewells or advice or last-minute warnings. Just stayed in the kitchen, silent as stone. When Maggie descended with her bag, her aunt sat at the table, hands wrapped around a cold cup of tea. "I know you think I'm cruel," Aunt Sarah said without looking up. "That I never loved you." Maggie waited, uncertain where this was going. "Your mother was my sister. Did I ever tell you that?" Her aunt's voice had gone soft, almost fragile. "She was beautiful, Maggie, small and graceful and everything I wasn't. Men fell over themselves for her. She chose your father, and they were happy, so damn happy it hurt to see." She finally looked up and her eyes were wet. "Then the famine came. Then she died bringing you over. Your father died 3 days later, just gave up. And I was left with you, this child who looked just like her, but would never have her easy life because the world had changed. Beauty didn't matter anymore. Survival did. I tried to make you hard. Tried to prepare you. By telling me I was worthless." Maggie's voice shook. "By telling you the truth." Aunt Sarah stood abruptly. "Look at you. Look at how they treat you. Was I wrong?" Maggie hefted her bag. "Maybe you weren't wrong about them. But you were wrong about me." She moved toward the door. "I am my mother's daughter. And maybe that means I won't survive. But at least I'll have tried." Outside, Ben waited beside a worn wagon hitched to 2 sturdy horses. He took her bag without comment, storing it in the back, then offered his hand to help her up. His palm was calloused rough from work, but his grip was steady. Maggie climbed onto the bench seat, arranging her skirts. Ben settled beside her, taking up the reins. He didn't speak, didn't offer platitudes or promises, just clicked his tongue, and the horses moved. As they rolled through Bitter Creek, faces turned to watch. Some laughed. Some shook their heads. Deputy Morrison stood outside the saloon grinning like he'd witnessed the joke of the century. "Give it a week," he called. "She'll come running back." Ben's hands tightened on the reins, but he didn't respond. Just kept the horses at a steady pace, headed east out of town. The buildings fell away. The road became dirt, then barely a trail. Mountains rose in the distance, purple against the late afternoon sky. The land opened up vast and empty and intimidating in its scale. "How far?" Maggie asked, finally needing to break the silence. 3 miles. Ranches in the foothills." He glanced at her. "It's not much. House needs work, but it's quiet." Quiet. The word hung between them, carrying weight she didn't fully understand yet. They rode in silence for another mile. Then Ben spoke again, voice low. "You asked why I chose you." Maggie's heart kicked. "You answered." "I didn't finish." He kept his eyes on the road. "This morning before the gathering, I saw you by the well. You were helping a dog, mangy thing, probably diseased. Deputy Morrison kicked at it, tried to make it run off. You put yourself between them." Maggie remembered. She'd thought no one had noticed. "The dog bit Morrison." Ben continued, and his mouth quirked slightly. "Drew blood. He went for his gun, would have shot it dead. But you grabbed the dog and ran. Took it behind the church, I think. Hid it until Morrison gave up looking." "How did you—" "I was in town early. No one saw me." He finally looked at her, and his eyes held something she couldn't name. "My wife, my first wife, she did things like that. Saved wounded animals. Defended the defenseless, even when it cost her." His voice roughened. "She died because of that kindness. Took in a woman who had fever, tried to help her. Caught it herself." Maggie's chest tightened. "I'm sorry." "It's been 6 years. Pain doesn't go away, but you learn to carry it." He turned back to the road. "I didn't choose you because you reminded me of her. I chose you because I saw you make the choice she would have made to help something weaker, even when the world punished you for it. That's rare. That's worth protecting." The words settled over Maggie like a blanket, warm and unexpected. Not love. Not even friendship yet. But respect. Recognition. Something she'd never had before. "I can't promise this will be easy," Ben said. "I'm not good company. I don't talk much. The ranch work is hard and I can't afford to hire help. You'll earn your keep and some days you'll hate me for it." "Will you hate me?" Maggie asked. He considered the question seriously. "No. I don't think I could hate someone who tried to save that dog." It wasn't a grand declaration, but somehow it was enough. The ranch came into view as the sun began its descent. A small house, weathered but solid. A barn that had seen better days. Corrals holding a few horses, gardens gone wild. Everything spoke of a man barely keeping his head above water, fighting a losing battle against time and circumstance. Ben pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house. For a moment, neither of them moved. "Last chance," he said quietly. "I can take you back. Tell the sheriff it didn't work out. You'd be shamed, but you'd be free of this." Maggie looked at the house, at the mountains beyond, at the vast sky turning gold and pink with sunset. Then she looked at Ben, this broken man who'd seen something in her worth claiming when no one else had. "Free to go back to what?" she asked. "No, I'm staying." He nodded once, then climbed down and came around to help her. His hands at her waist were impersonal, efficient. He set her on the ground and stepped back immediately. "House is simple," he said, grabbing her bag. 2 rooms. You'll have the bedroom. I'll sleep in the barn." "That's not—" "It is." His tone left no room for argument. "Until we're properly married, and maybe even after, depending on what you want. This arrangement doesn't give me rights to you. Won't ever give me rights unless you choose it." The statement should have relieved her. It did. But it also made her aware of how little she understood about this man, and what he actually wanted from this arrangement. He led her inside. The house smelled like dust and disuse. A main room with a fireplace, a rough table, 2 chairs, A smaller room to the side, the bedroom with a narrow bed and a trunk. Everything was clean but sparse. No woman's touch anywhere. No life beyond mere survival. Ben set her bag on the bed. "I'll bring in water. There's bread and some dried meat if you're hungry. I'll make something better tomorrow. You cook. Had to learn. No one else to do it." He paused in the doorway. "Rest if you need to. It's been a long day." Then he was gone, leaving Maggie alone in this strange room that was apparently hers now. She sat on the bed testing it. The mattress was thin but adequate. The blanket was rough wool. Everything smelled like cedar and horses. Through the window she could see Ben moving toward the well, his limp more pronounced now that he wasn't trying to hide it. He drew water with efficient motions, clearly practiced. Then he carried the bucket to the barn, probably to tend the horses before anything else. Maggie unpacked slowly, putting her few dresses in the trunk, setting her letterbox on the small table by the window. When she opened it, her latest letter to her mother sat on top. She pulled it out, reading her own words from the night before. "I'm so tired, Mama. So tired of pretending it doesn't hurt." She picked up her pencil and added a postscript. "Something impossible happened today. A man chose me. Not for beauty or money or any normal reason. Maybe for madness, maybe for mercy. I don't know yet. But Mama, for the first time in 9 years someone looked at me and saw something worth claiming. Even if this all falls apart tomorrow, I'll have had that. I'll have known what it feels like to be chosen. I'll write more when I understand what comes next. Your Maggie." She folded the letter, put it back in the box, and went to the window. The sun had set fully now, stars beginning to emerge. Ben was still in the barn. She could see lamplight through the cracks in the walls. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The town's mockery wouldn't stop just because she'd left. The work would be harder than anything she'd done before. This strange arrangement with a haunted man would test her in ways she couldn't predict. But tonight, standing in this simple room that was hers, watching stars appear over mountains she'd never dared dream of reaching, Maggie Brennan felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt possibility, and for now, that was enough. Maggie woke to the sound of someone chopping wood. The rhythm was steady, methodical axe meeting log. The crack of splitting timber, a pause, then again. She lay still for a moment, disoriented by the unfamiliar ceiling, the different quality of light through the window. Then memory crashed back. The gathering. Ben's choice. The ride to this ranch that was now somehow home. She dressed quickly in her brown work dress, braided her hair with fumbling fingers, and stepped into the main room. The fire was already going, coffee brewing in a battered pot. Through the open door she could see Ben working the woodpile, his shirt already damp with sweat, despite the morning chill. He must have heard her because he stopped, set down the axe, and came inside. His hair was pushed back from his face, and in the morning light she could see the full extent of the scar along his jaw, a thick, puckered line that spoke of some old violence. "Coffee's ready," he said, moving past her to pour 2 cups. "There's eggs if you want them. Chickens are decent layers at least." "I can cook," Maggie offered, taking the cup he handed her. The tin was hot against her palms. "Didn't ask you to." But his tone wasn't harsh, just matter of fact. "Today, I need to check the north fence. Storm last week took down some posts. You can come if you want, see the property. Or stay here, settle in." "I'll come." He nodded once like he'd expected that answer. "Wear sturdy boots if you have them. Terrain's rough." She didn't have sturdy boots. What she had were the worn leather shoes she'd brought from Ireland and a pair of work clogs Aunt Sarah had given her years ago. Ben saw her hesitation and disappeared into the bedroom she'd slept in. He returned with a pair of boots smaller than his, but still too large for her. These were... He stopped, cleared his throat. "They'll be big but better than what you've got. Stuff the toes with cloth." She took them carefully, understanding without him saying that these had belonged to his dead wife. The leather was soft, well-maintained, despite years of storage. When she put them on, they felt like wearing someone else's ghost. They ate quickly scrambled eggs with wild onions bread that was 2 days old, but toasted well enough. Ben moved with the efficiency of a man who'd been cooking for himself for years, no wasted motion. When they finished, he loaded a pack with tools rope and some leather strapping for repairs. "Can you ride?" he asked. "I've never tried." He studied her for a moment, then shook his head. "We'll walk then. It's only 2 miles. Riding would be faster, but no use breaking your neck learning today." They set out as the sun cleared the mountains. Ben's limp was more pronounced in the morning, something that loosened as he moved. He noticed her noticing and said without prompting, "Minier ball. Shiloh." Surgeon wanted to take the leg. I declined. You were in the war. Everyone was in the war one way or another. He adjusted the pack on his shoulder. I was a medical orderly. Saw more men die from infection than bullets. Saw more suffering than any God should allow. His voice went flat. When it was over, I came west. Figured out here death made sense. Harsh winters, hard land predators, not men killing each other over lines on a map. Maggie walked beside him, matching his pace. The land around them was beautiful in a stark way. Rolling hills covered in sagebrush, stands of aspen, turning gold. The mountains looming purple in the distance. So different from the green hills of Ireland, she barely remembered, or even the flat monotony around Bitter Creek. "What about you?" Ben asked after a while. "How'd an Irish girl end up in Wyoming territory?" "Famine ship, 1867. I was 12. The words came easier than she expected. "Mama died on the passage. Da made it to shore but died 3 days later. Fever, they said, but I think it was just giving up. Aunt Sarah was the only family left, so I came here. And she treated you like a burden." It wasn't a question. Maggie glanced at him, surprised. "You noticed that?" "Hard to miss. Way she looked at you yesterday like you were proof of her own failure." He paused to check their direction, then continued walking. "Some people, their own pain makes them kinder. Others, it just makes them cruel. Your aunt's the second kind. She wasn't always like that. Or so she says. Her husband died, she lost a baby." Maggie stopped, realizing she was defending a woman who'd never defended her. "Grief's not an excuse for cruelty," Ben said quietly. "Plenty of us carry loss. Doesn't give us the right to inflict it on others." They walked in silence after that, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind that didn't need filling. Maggie found herself relaxing into it, into the rhythm of walking into the vast quiet of the land around them. The fence line came into view around mid-morning. Ben was right. Several posts had been knocked down, wire tangled in the dirt. He dropped the pack and pulled out his tools, studying the damage. "Wires salvageable. Posts need replacing." He glanced at her. "You good with your hands?" "Depends on what you need." He handed her a pair of heavy gloves. "Hold the wire when I tell you. Keep tension on it so I can secure the posts. If it snaps, let go, it'll tear through flesh." For the next 2 hours they worked together in near silence. Ben would position a post, drive it into the ground with a heavy mallet, and Maggie would hold the wire taut while he secured it. Her arms burned. Sweat soaked through her dress. The gloves chafed her palms despite the protection. But she didn't complain, and Ben didn't coddle her. "Good," he said when they finished the last section. "That'll hold through winter." Maggie pulled off the gloves, examining her hands. Red sore, but no blisters yet. Ben pulled out a canteen and offered it to her first. She drank gratefully, then passed it back. "You work hard," he observed. "You sound surprised." "Townfolk usually are soft, not used to real labor." He took a long drink. "But you didn't flinch, didn't whine. Just did what needed doing." It was the closest thing to a compliment Maggie had received in years. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. They started back toward the house, the sun high overhead now. Halfway there, Ben stopped suddenly, hand going up in a signal for quiet. Maggie froze. He pointed toward a cluster of rocks about 30 yards off. At first, she saw nothing. Then, movement, a horse lying on its side, struggling weakly. Even from this distance, she could see something was wrong. "Stay here," Ben said, already moving toward it. But Maggie followed. As they got closer, the problem became clear. The horse, a young mare, probably wild, had gotten her leg wedged between two rocks. The struggling had torn the skin, blood matting the fur. The animal's eyes rolled white with panic. "Damn," Ben breathed. "She's been here a while. Probably all night." He approached slowly, hands out, voice low and soothing. "Easy, girl. Easy now. We're going to help." The mare tried to lunge away, screaming in fear and pain. Ben stepped back, reassessing. "She's too panicked. If I get close, she'll hurt herself worse. Might have to—" He stopped, but Maggie understood what he wasn't saying. "Let me try," she said. Ben turned, surprised. "She'll kick. You don't know horses well enough to—" "I know frightened animals." Maggie moved forward slowly, hands visible, making herself small. "My da worked with horses in Ireland. I was always in the stables." She began humming low, wordless, a tune her father had used. The mare's ears flicked toward her. Maggie kept coming, kept humming, not looking directly at the animal's eyes. Predators stared. Prey looked away. "That's it," she murmured, mixing Irish and English in a soft patter. "You're hurt, I know. Scared, I know. But we'll help, we will. Just let us help." The mare's struggling slowed. Maggie knelt within kicking range. She heard Ben's sharp inhale behind her but didn't stop. She reached out slowly, let the mare smell her hand, then touched the sweating neck with gentle fingers. "There now, there's a brave girl. Got yourself stuck, didn't you? Happens to the best of us." She kept touching, kept murmuring, letting her voice wrap around the animal's fear. "We'll get you free. Won't hurt you. Promise on my mam's grave." Ben moved in from the other side, following her lead, keeping his movements smooth and unhurried. Together, they examined the trapped leg. The rocks had her wedged tight, but the leg itself didn't seem broken, just badly abraded. "On three," Ben said quietly. "I'll lift the rock. You pull her leg free." Maggie positioned herself, hands ready. Ben counted down, then heaved. The rock shifted. Maggie guided the leg out, and the mare scrambled to her feet immediately. For a moment, Maggie thought she'd bolt. But the horse stood there, trembling weight off the injured leg. "She needs treatment," Maggie said, examining the wound from a safe distance. "That'll infect if we leave it. She's wild. Can't bring her home." "Then we treat her here." Maggie looked at Ben. "You have supplies in your pack." He did basic medical supplies he carried for emergencies. Over the next hour, while Ben held the mare's head and kept her calm with handfuls of grass he'd torn up, Maggie cleaned the wound with water from the canteen, applied a salve Ben had, and wrapped it with strips torn from her petticoat. The mare stood for it all, occasionally dancing, but not fighting. When they finished, she limped a few steps away, then stopped to graze, keeping one eye on them. "She'll need watching," Maggie said, washing her hands with the last of the water. "For a few days at least. Make sure infection doesn't set in." Ben was staring at her with an odd expression. "Where'd you learn that?" "Told you. My da worked with horses. I was always underfoot, always watching. He taught me what he could before—" She stopped, surprised by the sudden thickness in her throat. "Before we left Ireland." "That wasn't just knowledge," Ben said slowly. "That was gift. The way you gentled her, the way you knew exactly how much touch she could handle. I've seen trained handlers with less skill." Maggie shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Animals made sense to me. Always have. More than people." "People are harder," Ben agreed. He shouldered his pack. "That mare, if she survives, if the leg heals clean, she'll remember you. Wild horses don't forget kindness or cruelty." They walked home in silence again, but something had shifted. Ben kept glancing at her like he was recalculating something, reassessing. When they reached the house, he stopped her before she could go inside. "What you did back there that's rare, valuable." He met her eyes directly. "I told you yesterday I needed a partner. I meant it. But I didn't realize you'd bring actual skill. This ranch needs someone who knows animals. I've been barely keeping them alive." "You want me to work with the horses?" "I want you to do what you're good at, same as I'll do what I'm good at." He paused. "There's a mare in the barn, older, having trouble with a foal she's carrying. Been worried sick about her. Maybe you could show me." The barn was dim and smelled of hay and manure and horse sweat. 6 horses, total 4 geldings, 2 mares. Ben led her to the far stall, where a dappled gray mare stood sides heaving. Maggie could see the problem immediately. The mare was too thin-stressed, and the foal was sitting wrong inside her. "When's she due?" 2 weeks, maybe 3, but she's been off her feed, won't settle." Maggie entered the stall slowly, letting the mare accept her presence. She ran her hands over the swollen belly, feeling the foal's position. It's breech, probably causing her pain. She looked at Ben. "Has she foaled before?" "Twice, both times without trouble. This time will be different." Maggie kept her hands moving, soothing. "We need to keep her calm, keep her eating. When labor starts, we'll have to turn the foal. I can do it, but I'll need help." "You've done this before." "In Ireland, yes. Not since." Maggie straightened, brushing hay from her skirt. "But some things you don't forget." Ben leaned against the stall door, arms crossed, something like wonder on his scarred face. "The town looked at you and saw nothing useful. They're all blind fools." "They saw what they wanted to see," Maggie said. "What I looked like mattered more than what I could do. Their loss is my gain then." He pushed off the door. "I'll start dinner. You stay with her if you want. Get to know each other." After he left, Maggie spent another hour in the barn talking to the mare in low tones, running her hands over the horse's body, establishing trust. The other horses watched curiously. One of the geldings, a big bay with kind eyes, stuck his head over the stall door, begging for attention. "You're a beggar, aren't you?" Maggie scratched his forehead. "What's your name then?" "That's Samson," Ben called from the barn entrance. She hadn't heard him return. "The gray is Delilah, fitting given how much trouble she causes. The others I just call by color. Never been good with names." He'd brought 2 plates of food beans and salt pork with cornbread. They ate sitting on hay bales, the horses moving peacefully around them. It was the most relaxed Maggie had felt in years. No judgment here, no mockery, just work and animals, and a man who seemed content with silence. "Can I ask you something?" Maggie said finally. "You can ask. Can't promise I'll answer." "Yesterday you mentioned your wife. You said she died 6 years ago." Ben's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Do you—" Maggie searched for the right words. "Do you still love her? Every day?" His answer was immediate, unflinching. "I'll love her until I die. That doesn't change." The honesty should have hurt. Instead, Maggie found it oddly comforting. Then why marry again? "Because the bank won't give me the loan I need to keep this place running unless I can prove stability. Because the territory's pushing settlement and family values. Because—" He stopped, set down his empty plate. "Because I'm tired of fighting alone, not for love, not for romance, but for partnership. Someone to share the burden." "That's all you want, a work partner?" "That's all I can offer." He looked at her directly. "Is that enough for you?" Maggie thought about Bitter Creek, about her aunt's house, about 9 years of being told she should be grateful for scraps. Then she thought about today, working the fence, saving the mare, being trusted with the pregnant horse. Being seen for what she could do instead of what she looked like. "Yes," she said. "It's enough." Something eased in Ben's expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "Good. Then we understand each other." The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Maggie woke early, started the fire, made coffee. Ben would already be working feeding horses, checking fences, chopping wood. They'd eat breakfast together, then divide the tasks. Ben handled the heavy labor. Maggie took over the animals and the garden, coaxing life back into beds that had been neglected. She checked on the wild mare every day, bringing grain and water. The leg was healing clean, and the horse had stopped fleeing when Maggie approached. By the end of the first week, the mare was eating from Maggie's hand. "You're making a pet of her," Ben observed one evening. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm making an ally." Maggie scratched the mare's neck. "Wild doesn't mean worthless. Just means she's been hurt too many times to trust easily." Ben was quiet for a moment. "Talking about the horse or yourself?" "Both, I reckon." He nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. "Fair enough." The pregnant mare Delilah took up most of Maggie's attention. She was getting closer to her time, more restless. Maggie moved a bedroll into the barn, sleeping there, so she could monitor the situation. Ben didn't argue, just brought her extra blankets and a better lantern. "You'll wake me when it starts?" he asked. "You'll probably hear her, but yes." It happened 3 nights later. Maggie jerked awake to Delilah's distressed whinnying. She was up and moving before full consciousness hit, lighting the lantern with shaking hands. "Ben," she called. "Now." He appeared within minutes, hair mussed, suspenders hanging. "She's in labor." "Starting. Help me get her down." They worked together, settling Delilah on her side in the deep straw. The mare's eyes rolled, breath coming in harsh pants. Maggie ran her hands over the swollen belly, feeling for the foal. "It's coming wrong. Front leg's back. I need to reach in, turn it." She looked at Ben. "This is going to be messy." "I've seen messy. Tell me what you need." For the next 2 hours, Maggie worked with her whole arm inside the mare, feeling for the foal's legs, trying to maneuver them forward. Delilah screamed and thrashed. Ben held her head, murmuring constant reassurance, keeping her as calm as possible. Sweat poured down Maggie's face. Her arm burned. Her back screamed from the position. "Almost," she gasped. "Almost got it there." She felt the shift as the foal moved into the right position. "She needs to push now. Help her up." They got Delilah to her feet. Within 20 minutes, the foal slid free in a rush of fluid and membrane. A filly dark like her mother, perfect. Maggie fell back into the straw, exhausted. Her dress was ruined, covered in blood, and worse. Her arm throbbed. But the foal was breathing, struggling to her spindly legs, and Delilah was already turning to clean her baby with long licks of her tongue. "You did it," Ben said, staring at the scene. "You saved them both." "We did it," Maggie corrected. "I couldn't have held her without you." He looked at her, then really looked at her, covered in filth, exhausted, grinning like she'd won a prize. And he smiled. Actually smiled, the expression transforming his usually stern face. "Come on," he said, offering his hand. "Let's get you cleaned up." At the water pump behind the house, Maggie scrubbed her arms while Ben worked the handle. The water was freezing, but it felt glorious. When she was as clean as she could get without a full bath, he handed her a towel. "That was something," he said quietly. "What you did in there. I've seen surgeons work with less skill. It's not the same. Isn't it, knowing where to put your hands, how to feel what's wrong, how to fix it without causing more damage? That's medicine, Maggie. Just because the patient has 4 legs doesn't make it less impressive." She ducked her head, unused to this kind of praise. "My Da would be proud, I think." "He should be. I am." Ben leaned against the house wall. "You know what this means, don't you? You can do this for other ranchers. They'd pay good money for someone who can handle difficult births, could pull in real income." The idea hadn't occurred to her. "You think so?" "I know so. Half the ranches around here lose mares and foals every year because they don't know what to do. You could save them." He paused. "Save us too. The money would help with the bank." "Then I'll do it." They stood there in the pre-dawn darkness, the barn light warm behind them. the mountains just starting to show their edges against the lightening sky. Something had changed between them over these weeks, from strangers to something like friends. Not love, not yet, maybe never, but trust, partnership, something real. "The ceremony's next week," Ben said. "Sheriff sent word. Reverend Shaw's doing all the marriages from the lottery on the same day." Maggie's stomach tightened. She'd almost forgotten about the actual wedding. "Will we have to go into town?" "Have to. It's official business." He must have heard the fear in her voice because he added, "I'll be right beside you. Anyone says something cruel, they'll answer to me." "You can't fight the whole town. Watch me." Despite herself, Maggie smiled. "You're a strange man, Ben Holloway." "Heard that before." He pushed off the wall. "Get some sleep. Sun'll be up in an hour and those horses won't feed themselves." But as he walked away, he called back, "Maggie, that thing you did tonight, that was miraculous. Don't let anyone, including yourself, tell you different." She stood alone by the pump, his words wrapping around her like armor. For the first time since leaving Ireland, Maggie felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The morning of the ceremony dawned cold in gray, threatening snow. Maggie, dressed in this blue gown, Aunt Sarah and Lily had altered her hands, shaking so badly she could barely manage the buttons. Through the bedroom window she could see Ben in the yard, hitching the horses to the wagon. He'd put on a clean shirt, dark trousers without patches, boots she'd never seen him wear. He looked uncomfortable, like the clothes didn't fit right, even though they clearly did. She braided her hair 3 times before getting it right, pinned it up, then pulled it down again. Nothing looked proper. Nothing felt right. Finally, she left it in a simple braid down her back and stepped outside. Ben turned at the sound of the door. His eyes widened slightly, the most reaction she'd ever seen from him. "You look—" He stopped, cleared his throat. "Fine. You look fine. You don't have to lie." "I'm not." He offered his hand to help her into the wagon. "Ready." She wasn't. Would never be. But she climbed up anyway, settling onto the bench seat beside him. He clicked his tongue, and the horses moved, carrying them toward Bitter Creek and whatever awaited there. They rode in silence for the first mile. Then Ben spoke, eyes on the road. "If it gets to be too much, you give me a sign. We'll leave ceremony or not. We can't just leave. It's legally required." "Let me worry about the law." His jaw was set, that stubborn line she'd come to recognize. "Nobody's going to torment you while I'm standing there. I don't care what the sheriff says." Warmth spread through Maggie's chest. Not love, she still didn't know what that felt like, but something close. Gratitude, maybe. Or just the simple relief of having someone in her corner for once. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded once, and they continued in silence until Bitter Creek came into view. The church stood at the center of town, its white steeple stark against the gray sky. Wagons already crowded the area, all the couples from the lottery, their families half the town come to witness. Maggie's stomach churned. She wanted to tell Ben to turn around, to run, to go anywhere but here. But he was already guiding the horses to a spot near the edge of the gathering. "Stay close," he said, climbing down. He came around to her side and offered both hands this time, lifting her down with careful strength. Then deliberately, he offered his arm. "We walk in together." She slipped her hand through his elbow, feeling the solid muscle beneath the fabric. They moved toward the church, and immediately heads turned. Whispers started like wind through grass. "Can't believe she actually came. Look at her acting like she belongs. Poor man probably realizes his mistake by now." Ben's arm tensed beneath her fingers, but his expression stayed neutral. They climbed the church steps, and Deputy Morrison appeared, blocking the doorway with a grin that made Maggie's skin crawl. Well, well, the happy couple. His eyes raked over Maggie with undisguised contempt. "Holloway, you sure you don't want to back out? Sheriff might allow it, considering the unusual circumstances." "Move," Ben said, voice flat. "I'm just saying there's still time to—" "I said move." Ben took a step forward, and something in his posture, the set of his shoulders, the controlled violence in his stillness, made Morrison step aside. Inside the church was packed. Rows of pews filled with townspeople dressed in their Sunday best. The other couples stood near the front, young brides blushing, nervous grooms straightening ties. Lily was there with Thomas Webb, her face calm as always. She caught Maggie's eye and nodded slightly. Reverend Shaw stood at the altar, Bible in hand, looking grave. He was an older man, kind-eyed usually, but today he wore the weight of what he was doing like a stone around his neck. Ben guided Maggie to the end of the line of couples. Aunt Sarah sat in a pew nearby, face unreadable. Mrs. Hendricks sat beside her, whispering behind her hand. Around them, the pews filled with more townspeople, all craning to see, to judge, to witness this spectacle. Sheriff Garrett stood to the side, arms crossed, surveying the scene like a general reviewing troops. When everyone had settled, he nodded to Reverend Shaw. "We are gathered here," the Reverend began, his voice heavy with resignation, "to join these couples in matrimony before God and this community. Marriage is a sacred bond entered into with reverence and commitment." He paused, looking out over the couples. "Let us pray that these unions, however they came to be, will honor that sacredness." The prayer that followed was long and somber. Maggie barely heard it. Her heart pounded so loud she was sure everyone could hear. Ben stood perfectly still beside her, but she could feel the tension radiating from him. "We will proceed in order," Reverend Shaw announced. "Each couple will come forward, exchange their vows, and be pronounced married. Mr. and Mrs. Webb, please step forward." Lily and Thomas moved to the altar. The ceremony was brief, efficient. The same vows repeated, rings exchanged, a kiss that was more formality than affection. The crowd applauded politely. One couple down. The next couple came forward, then the next. Each ceremony was identical, mechanical. The brides smiled tremulously. The grooms looked relieved or resigned, or occasionally hopeful. The crowd's attention wandered, people shifting in their seats, whispering. But when it came time for Ben and Maggie to step forward, the church went silent, every eye fixed on them. The weight of that attention was crushing. They walked to the altar. Reverend Shaw looked at them with something like pity, then opened his Bible. "Benjamin Holloway and Margaret Brennan, you stand before God and these witnesses to enter into holy matrimony." He cleared his throat. "Benjamin, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" Ben's voice was steady, clear. "I do." Reverend Shaw turned to Maggie. "Margaret, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" Her throat had closed. She couldn't speak. The silence stretched, and the whispers started again. "She's going to refuse. Smart girl if she does. Probably too scared to say no." Ben's hand found hers, squeezed gently. Not demanding, just reminding her she wasn't alone. Maggie drew a shaky breath and found her voice. "I do." The words were barely a whisper, but they were enough. Reverend Shaw nodded. "Then, by the authority vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I pronounce you husband and wife." He closed his Bible. "You may kiss the bride." Ben turned to her, and Maggie's heart stuttered. They hadn't discussed this part, hadn't practiced. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. Their lips met in the briefest of touches, chaste, almost brotherly. But even that small contact sent warmth flooding through her. When he pulled back, his eyes held a question. She nodded slightly. "I'm okay." They turned to face the congregation. Instead of applause, there was awkward silence. A few people clapped, mostly out of obligation. Others just stared. And some, Deputy Morrison among them, smiled like they were watching a joke unfold. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sheriff Garrett announced, standing, "these couples are now legally bound. The territory thanks you for your service to settlement and progress." His eyes swept over Ben and Maggie. "May your unions prove fruitful and lasting." The ceremony concluded with another prayer. Then people began filing out. The other couples were immediately surrounded by well-wishers' families offering congratulations, friends slapping backs, mothers dabbing at tears. Ben and Maggie stood alone in the aisle as the crowd parted around them like water around stones. "Let's go," Ben said quietly. But before they could move, Sheriff Garrett blocked their path. "Mr. Holloway, a word. Make it quick." The sheriff's expression hardened. "I trust you understand the terms of your marriage. The bank has been informed. They'll expect to see evidence of a functioning household before approving any loans." "What kind of evidence?" "Stability, productivity, a wife who can demonstrate value to the operation." His eyes flicked to Maggie dismissively. "I hope for your sake, she's more useful than she appears." Ben's hand tightened on Maggie's arm. "Sheriff, with all due respect, which is none my wife's value isn't your concern. The ceremony's done. We've met your requirements. Now step aside." "Careful, Holloway. You may not need the town's approval, but you need the bank's money. I'd hate to see your pride cost you that ranch." "My pride has already cost me more than you'll ever know. A ranch is just land." Ben stepped forward, and the sheriff actually moved back. "We're leaving." They pushed through the church doors into cold air that felt like freedom. But the ordeal wasn't over. Townspeople lingered outside, forming a gauntlet they'd have to walk through. Maggie's legs felt weak. The faces around her blurred, some curious, some pitying, some openly contemptuous. "There goes the hermit and his charity case. Give it a month. She'll run back to her aunt. If he doesn't send her back first." The voices piled on top of each other, crushing. Maggie's breath came shorter. Her vision narrowed. She was going to faint or scream or both. Then Ben stopped walking. Just stopped right in the middle of Main Street, forcing everyone to stop with them. He turned to face the crowd, Maggie's hand still gripped in his. "I know what you all think," he said, not shouting, but his voice carrying. "I've heard the whispers, the jokes. You think I made this choice out of madness or rebellion, or some misguided sense of charity?" The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Sheriff Garrett frowned from the church steps. "But here's what you don't know," Ben continued. "This woman, my wife, has more skill in her smallest finger than most of you have in your whole bodies. 2 weeks ago, she saved a wild mare that would have died. Last week, she delivered a breech foal that no veterinarian in 3 counties could have handled. She works harder than any person I've ever met, and she does it without complaint." Maggie's cheeks burned, but Ben wasn't finished. "You looked at her and saw nothing but what you wanted to see. You judged her by her body, her accent, her circumstances. You never once asked what she could do, what she was worth beyond your narrow standards." His eyes swept the crowd. "That's your failing, not hers." "Pretty speech," Deputy Morrison called out. "But words don't change facts. She's still..." "Still what?" Ben turned on him. "Still a better person than you'll ever be. Still someone with actual value beyond cruelty and mockery." "You're right about that." Morrison's face went red. "You can't talk to me like..." "I just did." Ben's voice went cold. "And if you or anyone else in this town wants to continue talking about my wife, you'll do it to my face, not behind her back, not in whispers, to my face." The challenge hung in the air. Morrison's hand drifted toward his gun belt, and the crowd collectively held its breath. But Sheriff Garrett's voice cut through the tension. "That's enough. Everyone disperse. Show's over." Slowly, reluctantly, people began moving away. Morrison shot Ben a look of pure hatred, but turned and stalked off. The crowd thinned, though faces still watched from windows and doorways. Ben guided Maggie toward the wagon. Her whole body shook from adrenaline, from emotion, from the sheer overwhelming weight of what had just happened. He lifted her onto the seat, then climbed up beside her. Before he could take the reins, a small figure appeared beside the wagon. Lily Chen with Thomas Webb standing a respectful distance behind her. "That was brave," Lily said, looking up at Ben. "And foolish. You've made enemies today." "Had them already," Ben replied. Lily nodded, then turned to Maggie. "I meant what I said before the lottery. We define ourselves, not them. You're doing that. Keep doing it." She pressed something into Maggie's hand, a small cloth bundle. "For luck. Old country tradition." "Thank you," Maggie managed. Lily stepped back and Thomas tipped his hat. As Ben urged the horses forward, Maggie unwrapped the bundle. Inside was a small jade pendant carved in the shape of a horse. She clutched it tightly, this gift from another outsider, another woman who understood. They were almost clear of town when a voice called out, "Maggie, wait!" Aunt Sarah hurried toward them, skirts lifted to avoid the mud. Ben slowed but didn't stop completely. Sarah had to jog to keep pace. "Maggie, She was breathing hard. "I wanted to say—" She stopped, seeming to struggle with words. "Your mother would be proud of you, of how you've handled this." It was the last thing Maggie expected. "Aunt Sarah, I was wrong." Her aunt continued, still walking alongside the slow-moving wagon. "About you. About what you're worth. I let my own bitterness poison how I saw you." Tears streaked her face. "I'm sorry. I know it's too late, but I'm sorry." The wagon rolled past, but Sarah called after them. "You deserved better than how I treated you. You deserved better than this whole damn town." Maggie twisted in her seat, watching her aunt's figure recede. The apology was years too late, tinged with guilt and regret. But it was something. A crack in the armor of cruelty that had defined their relationship. "You want me to go back?" Ben asked quietly. Maggie faced forward, wiping at her eyes. "No. Keep going." They rode in silence until Bitter Creek disappeared behind them. Then Ben spoke, voice rough. "I'm sorry you had to stand there and listen to that. All of it. You defended me. Shouldn't have to defend you. They should see what's obvious." "It's not obvious to them. Maybe it never will be." Maggie looked down at the jade pendant in her palm. "But you see it. Lily sees it. That's more than I've ever had before." "It's not enough." "Maybe not. But it's a start." The ranch appeared on the horizon, and Maggie felt something loosen in her chest. This place, rough and demanding as it was, had become home in a way Bitter Creek never had. Here she was valued. Here she could be herself. Ben pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house, but didn't immediately climb down. "Maggie, I need to tell you something." Her stomach tightened. What I said back there about your skills, your worth, I meant every word. But there's more." He turned to face her fully. "When I chose you at the lottery, I told you it was because I saw you save that dog. That was true. But it wasn't the whole truth. What's the rest? I saw myself in you." His voice dropped. "Someone the world had decided was worthless. Someone carrying pain they didn't deserve. Someone just trying to survive in a place that showed no mercy." He paused. "I've been where you are. Invisible, except when people wanted someone to mock or pity. After the war, after Sarah died, I came west, and people looked at me like I was broken. Damaged goods, a cripple with ghosts." Maggie's throat ached. "Ben, I chose you because I knew you'd understand what it's like to be judged for things you can't control. And because I thought maybe together we could stop being invisible. Could prove we're worth more than what they decided." Is that what today was, proving something? Maybe. Or maybe it was just refusing to let them define us anymore. He rubbed his face. "I'm not good at this, talking about feelings, explaining myself. But I want you to know this arrangement between us, this marriage, it doesn't have to stay what it started as. Partnership. Friendship, maybe someday something more if we both want it. But whatever it becomes, it'll be our choice, not theirs." The words hung between them, heavy with possibility. Maggie searched his face. This man who'd upended her life, who'd stood before the whole town and declared her valuable, who was offering her something she'd never dared hope for. "I don't know how to be someone's wife," she said honestly. "I don't know how to be close to someone without fear. I don't know how to open my heart again without it destroying me," Ben replied. "So we'll figure it out together, slowly. No expectations, no pressure. Just partnership. Just partnership," he agreed. "For now." They climbed down from the wagon and Ben began unhitching the horses. Maggie stood in the yard, looking at the house, the barn, the mountains beyond. The sun was breaking through clouds now, sending shafts of light across the land. "Ben," she called. He looked up from the harness. "Thank you. For choosing me. For defending me. For seeing me." His expression softened. "Thank you for staying. For working beside me. For bringing life back to this place." They held each other's gaze for a long moment, and Maggie felt something shift inside her. Not love, not yet. But trust deepening into something richer. The possibility of more, waiting patiently for them to be ready. A whinny broke the moment. The wild mare, the one Maggie had saved weeks ago, stood at the fence line watching them. Her leg had healed completely, but she hadn't left. Stayed close to the ranch, grazing nearby, never quite wild anymore, but not quite tame either. "She's still here," Maggie observed. "She knows where she's safe." Ben finished with the horses and came to stand beside Maggie. Animals understand things people don't. They know when a place offers shelter, when someone won't hurt them. Is that what this is, shelter? For both of us, I think. He looked down at her, and something warm flickered in his gray eyes. But it could be more than that. Someday. Maggie nodded slowly, feeling the truth of it. Today had been hard, standing before that hostile crowd, hearing their judgment, feeling their contempt. But Ben had stood with her, had defended her, had shown her what partnership could mean. And now, standing in the yard of this rough ranch with mountains at their backs and horses in the barn and work waiting to be done, Maggie felt something unfamiliar unfurling in her chest. Hope. Not the desperate, clinging hope of survival, but the steady, growing hope of someone who'd found solid ground. Who'd found a place where she could become who she was meant to be. "Come on," Ben said, moving toward the barn. "Delilah and the foal need checking, and I want you to look at Samson's left front hoof. He's been favoring it." Maggie followed, pulling off her good dress sleeves to keep them clean, already mentally cataloging what she'd need to examine the hoof properly. The wedding dress could wait. The real work of building a life, the daily unglamorous work of caring for animals and land, and each other, that couldn't. As she entered the barn, Delilah nickered in greeting the foal bouncing on spindly legs beside her. Samson thrust his head over the stall door, demanding attention. Ben was already pulling out the hoof tools, ready to assist. This was marriage, Maggie realized. Not the ceremony in the church. Not the words spoken before hostile witnesses. But this, working side by side, trusting each other's skills, building something together, one day at a time. And for the first time in her 26 years, Maggie Brennan Holloway felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Winter came early that year, arriving with a fury that caught even the old-timers by surprise. The first real snow hit in late October, 3 weeks after the wedding. Maggie woke to silence, that particular muffled quiet that meant the world had been buried overnight. She padded to the window and stared at white covering everything, drifts piled high against the barn. Ben was already up, dressed in layers, pulling on his heavy coat. "Storm's bad," he said without preamble. "Horses need feeding, water needs breaking. Could be snowed in for days." They worked together in brutal, cold, breaking ice on troughs, hauling hay, checking each animal. The wild mare had moved into the barn on her own the night before, some instinct warning her. Smart girl. By noon, the wind had picked up, turning snow into horizontal knives. Ben made Maggie go inside while he secured the last of the outbuildings. She had stew going when he finally stumbled in, face raw from cold ice crusted in his beard. "That's the worst of it for now. But this is just the beginning. Weather like this, it'll blow for 3 days minimum. He was right. The storm raged for 4 days straight. They were trapped in the house together. The world shrunk down to firelight and the howling wind outside. At first, the forced proximity felt awkward. They'd been living together for weeks, but always with work to fill the spaces with reasons to be in different places. Now there was nowhere to go. Nothing to do but sit and talk and exist in each other's presence. On the second day, Ben pulled out a worn deck of cards. "You play. My da taught me. Before." They played hand after hand, the only sound the snap of cards and the fire crackling. Maggie won more than she lost, and Ben's eyebrows rose. "You're hustling me." "Maybe you're just bad at cards." His laugh surprised them both, rusty like he'd forgotten how. "Fair point." That night, with wind screaming outside, Ben asked, "Tell me about Ireland, the parts you remember." So Maggie did. Told him about green hills and stone walls, about her mother's singing voice, about her father's gentleness with animals. Told him about the hunger that came, how it hollowed people out from the inside, how watching neighbors die taught her that the world could be unspeakably cruel. "The ship was worse," she said quietly. "People packed in like cargo. The smell, the sickness. Mama held me the whole time, even when she was dying. Kept saying, 'You'll make it, my girl. You're stronger than you know.'" Her voice cracked. "I didn't feel strong. I felt like I was drowning." Ben was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, voice rough. "After Sarah died, my wife, I wanted to die too. Stood at the edge of a cliff for 2 hours trying to find the courage to jump. Kept thinking about how easy it would be. How the pain would finally stop." Maggie's breath caught. "What stopped you?" "A hawk. Sounds stupid, but this red-tailed hawk landed on a rock near me. Just sat there watching. Then it took off, and I watched it fly so free, so alive. And I thought, that bird doesn't know I'm suffering. Doesn't care. It's just living." He rubbed his face. "Made me realize the world would keep turning whether I was in it or not. But maybe there was something in still being here. Still fighting. And you came here. Ran here more like. Bought this failing ranch from a widow who was moving back east. Threw myself into work so hard I didn't have time to think. To feel." He looked at her directly. "Then that damn lottery happened, and the sheriff forced my hand. I was angry. Felt trapped. But then I saw you, and I saw someone else who was trapped. Someone else fighting to survive a world that showed no mercy. So you chose the other broken person. I chose the person who understood." He leaned forward. "We're not broken, Maggie. We're scarred. There's a difference. Broken things can't function. Scarred things, they're stronger for what they've survived." The words wrapped around her like a blanket. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, something fundamental shifted between them. On the 4th day, the storm finally broke. They dug out in brilliant sunshine, the world transformed into blinding white. Every fence line was buried. Paths had to be carved through chest-high drifts. The work was brutal, but the animals had survived, and that was what mattered. 2 days after the storm, a rider appeared, a young ranch hand from the Carter place 5 miles east. His horse was lathered, his face desperate. "Mr. Holloway, we need your wife. Ma'am, sorry to bother, but we got a mare in trouble. Been laboring 2 days, can't push the foal out. Pa says if someone doesn't help soon, we'll lose them both." Ben looked at Maggie. "Your choice." She was already moving, grabbing supplies. "How far?" "Hour's ride if we push." "Then let's not waste time." Ben saddled Samson and the wild mare, now gentle enough for riding if you asked nicely. Maggie rode the mare, amazed at how easily the horse accepted her. They followed the ranch hand through snow-covered trails, arriving at the Carter place as the sun began to set. The mare was in bad shape, exhausted eyes rolling, sides heaving. Maggie examined her quickly and felt her heart sink. "The foal's sideways. Been positioned wrong the whole time. She's torn up inside from trying to push." Mr. Carter, a weathered man in his 50s, stood with his hat in his hands. "Can you save her?" "I can try, but I need spacelight and quiet." Maggie looked at Ben. "I need your hands too. This is going to take both of us." What followed was 2 hours of intense, delicate work. Maggie reached inside the mare, feeling for the foal's position, working to turn it, while the horse screamed and thrashed. Ben held the mare's head, talking to her in that low, steady voice, keeping her calm enough for Maggie to work. The Carter family watched from the barn entrance, silent and tense. Finally, Maggie felt the shift. Got it. She needs to push now. The foal came in a rush, a colt this time larger than expected. He wasn't breathing. Maggie's heart plummeted. She'd turned him, but too late. The mare turned to nuzzle her baby, making sounds that broke Maggie's heart. "No," Maggie breathed. She grabbed the foal, cleared his mouth and nose, then pressed hard on his chest. Once, twice, 3 times. "Breathe, damn you! Breathe!" Nothing. The Carters were crying. Ben's face was stone. Maggie pressed harder, refusing to give up. "I didn't turn you wrong just so you could die. Breathe." A shudder, a cough. Then the foal gasped. Sides heaving, legs scrambling. Alive. The barn erupted. Mrs. Carter was sobbing. Mr. Carter grabbed Maggie's hand, pumping it. "You saved them both. God bless you, ma'am. God bless you." Maggie sank back, exhausted, covered in blood and fluid. Ben crouched beside her, eyes bright. "That was extraordinary." "That was terrifying," she corrected. "I thought we'd lost him." "But we didn't." He helped her to her feet. "You didn't." Mr. Carter wouldn't let them leave without payment, pressed coins into Maggie's hand despite her protests. "You earned every penny, and I'll tell every rancher from here to Cheyenne what you did. You'll have more work than you can handle." The ride home was quiet, both of them exhausted. But as they neared the ranch, Maggie spoke. "Ben, I couldn't have done that without you. The way you kept that mare calm, that was the difference. We make a good team." "We do." The words hung between them, meaning more than the surface suggested. Word spread fast. Within 2 weeks, 3 more ranchers came asking for Maggie's help. She saved 2 mares and lost one the hardest night of her life, holding a dying horse while the owner wept. But even that loss earned respect. She'd tried everything humanly possible. The money started coming in, not a fortune, but enough to ease the pressure on Ben's shoulders. Enough to prove to the bank that the ranch was viable, that this marriage was producing the stability the territory demanded. But it was more than money. It was purpose, value, proof that she mattered. Not everyone was pleased. Deputy Morrison made his displeasure known every time he saw them in town, which became less frequent as winter deepened. The few times they did venture into Bitter Creek for supplies, faces still turned away, whispers still followed. But there were changes too. Mrs. Chen at the laundry nodded politely. The blacksmith's wife asked Maggie's advice about her pregnant dog. Small cracks in the wall of hostility. December brought another storm worse than the first. They were snowed in for a week this time. The house felt smaller, but not claustrophobic. Comfortable. They'd fallen into rhythms. Ben would read aloud from the few books he owned while Maggie sketched. She'd shown him her drawings, finally expecting dismissal. Instead, he'd studied each one carefully. "These are good, really good. You've got a gift for capturing movement." "They're just scratches." "They're art." He held up a sketch of the wild mare running. "This is how you see the world, full of life and motion. Don't diminish that." One night, trapped inside with wind howling, Ben asked, "Do you regret it? Marrying me?" "This life." Maggie looked up from mending his shirt. She'd taken over that task without discussion. "Do you regret choosing me?" I asked first. She set down the needle, thinking. 3 months ago, I thought I'd live and die in my aunt's attic. Unwanted. Invisible. Now I'm sitting in my own home doing work that matters, married to a man who treats me like an equal. She met his eyes. Do I regret trading invisible misery for visible partnership? Not for a second. Even though the town still mocks us, the town doesn't matter anymore. It took me a while to understand that, but it's true. Their opinion can't touch me here. She paused. What about you regrets? Only that I didn't choose you sooner. The words came out rough, unplanned. I've been thinking all those years alone. I told myself I was protecting myself from more loss. But I was just half living. You brought life back, not just to the ranch, to me. Her heart stuttered. Ben, I'm not saying I'm ready for... He stopped struggling. What I mean is, I still love Sarah. I'll always love her. But there's room for more than one truth. I can honor what I had and still build something new. If you want that. No pressure. Just the possibility. Maggie's hands trembled. This was more than partnership. More than friendship. It was the door to something deeper opening slowly, carefully. I don't know how to love someone, she whispered. I've never, no one's ever. Me neither. Not like this. Not rebuilding from scars. He reached across the space between their chairs, palm up. An offering. But maybe we figure it out together. Slowly. At our own pace. She placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm, calloused, solid. They sat like that for a long time, the fire crackling, the wind screaming outside, two damaged people holding on to each other and calling it hope. Spring came eventually, as it always does. The snow melted, revealing a world greening itself back to life. Maggie's reputation had spread far enough that she had steady work ranchers from 3 counties calling for her skills. Ben's ranch was thriving, the bank loan approved expansion underway. But the real test came in April, when word reached them that Bitter Creek was holding its annual spring social. A dance and gathering, the whole territory invited. Ben watched Maggie's face carefully when he told her, "We don't have to go." "Yes, we do." Her voice was steady. "I'm tired of hiding. Tired of letting them think they won. You don't have to prove anything to them." "I'm not proving anything to them. I'm proving it to myself." So they went. Maggie wore a new dress, green, the color of Ireland's hills, that she'd made herself from fabric Ben had bought without telling her. He wore his good suit, the one from the wedding. They rode into town on a Saturday evening, the church hall already blazing with lanterns and music. The fiddles stopped when they walked in. Every head turned. The silence was thick enough to choke on. Then Lily Chen stepped forward, Thomas beside her. "Maggie, Ben, we saved you seats at our table." It broke the spell. Conversations resumed, though quieter. People watched from corners of their eyes. Deputy Morrison stood with his friends near the punch bowl, grinning that hateful grin. But Maggie held her head high. She talked with Lily, and Thomas laughed at their stories, refused to shrink. When the dancing started, other couples took the floor. Young people mostly. The married couples from the lottery, some comfortable now, some still awkward. Ben stood and offered his hand. "Dance with me." "Ben, I told you before I'm not graceful. I'll make a fool of myself." "Then we'll be fools together." His eyes held hers. "I want to dance with my wife. Let them see us. Really see us." Heart-pounding, Maggie took his hand. They walked to the center of the floor and the music paused. The fiddler looked uncertain. Ben nodded to him. "Play." The music started, slow, sweet, a waltz. Ben's hand settled at Maggie's waist, pulling her close. His other hand engulfed hers. They began to move. Maggie stumbled at first, terrified, remembering the market boys chanting for her to dance. But Ben's grip was steady, his movements sure despite his limp. He guided her, compensating for her uncertainty, making her movements look graceful through sheer force of partnership. "Look at me," he murmured. "Not them, just me." She did. His gray eyes held hers, and the rest of the world fell away. It was just them moving together, building something beautiful from broken pieces. The music swelled. Ben spun her gently, and she actually laughed, startled, delighted. When had she last danced? When had she last felt this light? People were watching. She could feel it. But the whispers weren't all mockery now. Some were surprise. Some were grudging appreciation. And some, just maybe, were the beginning of respect. When the song ended, the room was silent. Then from the back someone started clapping. Slowly, others joined. Not everyone, not even most. But enough. Lily clapped hardest, beaming. Even Reverend Shaw nodded approvingly. Deputy Morrison shoved away from the wall and left his friends trailing after him. But Maggie didn't care. Let them leave. Let them stew in their hatred. She'd just danced in front of the town that had mocked her, and she'd held her head high. Ben pulled her close for just a moment, his lips near her ear. You were beautiful. I was clumsy. You were brave. Same thing in my book. They stayed another hour visiting with the few people who approached them. Mr. and Mrs. Carter made a point of telling anyone who'd listen how Maggie had saved their mare and foal. A few other ranchers who'd used her services did the same. Slowly, grudgingly, opinions were shifting. But the real victory came when they left. Walking out into the cool spring night, Ben's arm around her shoulders, Maggie realized she wasn't the same woman who'd stood in that town square 6 months ago, waiting to be chosen. She wasn't invisible anymore, wasn't defined by cruelty. She was Maggie Holloway, healer of animals, partner to a good man, someone who mattered. What are you thinking? Ben asked as they rode home under stars. That I'm grateful. For the storm that trapped you in town that day. For the lottery. For your choice. For all of it. She looked at him. I know that sounds mad, being grateful for something that started so painfully. But it led here. To this, to us. Not mad at all. Not mad at all. He was quiet for a moment. I've been thinking about Sarah less lately. Not forgetting her, I'll never forget her. But the ache isn't constant anymore. There's room for other feelings, newer ones. Like what? He pulled the horses to a stop right there on the trail and turned to her. Like love. Not the same as what I had. Something different. Something that grew from partnership and respect and working side by side. His hand came up, cupping her face. I'm falling in love with you, Maggie. Have been for weeks. Just took me this long to name it. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I don't know if what I feel is love. I've nothing to compare it to. But I know I'd rather be here with you than anywhere else in the world. I know the thought of losing you terrifies me. I know when you smile, actually smile, it makes my chest ache in the best way. If that's love, then yes. I love you too. He kissed her, then not the chaste brush from their wedding, but a real kiss. Deep and claiming and full of promise. Maggie kissed him back, tasting salt from her tears, and sweetness from punch, and hope from somewhere deeper than words could reach. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ben rested his forehead against hers. We should get home. We should, she agreed, but neither moved. Finally laughing, they urged the horses onward. The ranch waited for them, their ranch, their home, their future, stretching out with all its uncertainty and possibility. That night, for the first time, Maggie didn't sleep in the bedroom alone. They lay together in Ben's bed in the barn loft, the place he'd been sleeping all these months. Talked until the stars wheeled overhead. Held each other like promises being kept. Fell asleep tangled together, two broken people choosing to be whole. Months passed. Summer came brutal and beautiful. Maggie's work expanded further. She was traveling to ranches as far as 2 days' ride, Ben often accompanying her. The money poured in. The ranch expanded. They bought more horses, including 3 wild ones that Maggie gentled with patience and kindness until they were the finest mounts in 3 counties. The town's attitude continued its slow thaw. Not everyone changed. Morrison and his ilk still sneered when they passed. But enough people shifted that Maggie could walk Main Street without expecting cruelty at every turn. Aunt Sarah appeared at the ranch one day in late summer, looking older and smaller than Maggie remembered. They sat on the porch, neither quite knowing what to say. "I've been wrong about a lot of things," Sarah said finally. "But especially about you. You didn't need me to toughen you up. You were always strong. I just couldn't see it through my own pain." "I know," Maggie said simply. "Can you forgive me?" "I'm trying." It was honest. Some days are easier than others. Sarah nodded, accepting that. "I won't ask for more than you can give, but I'd like to be part of your life, if you'll allow it." "We'll see," Maggie said. "Start with visiting occasionally. We'll build from there." It wasn't reconciliation. Not yet. But it was a door cracked open. Fall arrived, painting the mountains gold and red. One evening, sitting by the fire with Ben's arm around her, Maggie realized she was completely, impossibly happy. Not the frantic happiness of survival, but the deep contentment of someone exactly where they belonged. "What are you smiling about?" Ben asked. "Everything. This. Us." She burrowed deeper into his side. "A year ago I thought I'd spend my whole life invisible and alone. Now look at me." "I am looking." His arm tightened. "And I see the woman who saved a wild mare, delivered a dying foal, danced in front of her enemies, and chose to love a broken man. I see someone extraordinary." "We're both extraordinary," Maggie corrected. "We just needed someone to see it." The fire crackled. Outside, horses moved peacefully in their stalls. The wild mare Grace, they'd named her, whinnied softly. The mountains stood eternal against the darkening sky. This was the life they'd built from nothing, from mockery and pain, and two people brave enough to choose each other when no one else would. It wasn't perfect. Some wounds never fully healed, some scars stayed tender. The town would probably always whisper. Hard times would come again. But they'd face it together. Two scarred souls who'd learned that broken things could be stronger for their mending. That love didn't have to be perfect to be real. That sometimes the choice that looked like madness from the outside was exactly the right one on the inside. Maggie had been chosen that day in the town square, plucked from invisibility, by a man who saw her true worth. But the real choice, the one that mattered, was the one she made every day after, to stay to work, to build to love, to stand tall when the world expected her to shrink. She was Maggie Holloway now, not the fat Irish girl, not the charity case, not someone's burden or joke. She was a healer, a partner, a wife, a woman who'd reclaimed her dignity one day at a time and refused to let anyone steal it again. And that was worth more than all the acceptance in the world.